Sally that girl in the kitchen. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally that girl in the kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make Borrecas de Handrajo. What on earth is that, you must be wondering, because that's quite a mouthful. Well, for those of you not familiar with a Sephardic-Turkish Borreca, we make an amazing homemade dough and then we fill it and we make these little handheld pies out of this dough. Well, in this case, I'm going to be filling them with what is known as Handrajo, and that is Ladino, which is a very ancient language, so I'm sure you're not familiar with the word. So the word Handrajo means old clothes, kind of just raggedy and worn, similar to the concept of ropa vieja in Cuban, which is also part of my heritage. So I always find this correlation very interesting. So the Cuban ropa vieja is made with shredded meat. This Sephardic-Turkish version of Handrajo, old clothes, is made from stewed eggplant with tomatoes and onions. So we're going to stew those eggplants and we're going to just reduce that tomato down really well until it thickens up, and we're going to make this yummy vegetable filling for our borrecas. Of course, borrecas come in a ton of varieties, the most famous being the potato and cheese version, but this eggplant version is also delicious, and if you haven't tried it yet, today is your lucky day. It is super yummy. So I'm very excited to teach you how to make it. Let's not wait another second and let's get started. For the dough part of today's recipe, you will need 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 cup of warm water, 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, and some sesame seeds. This amount of dough will make 18 borrecas. For the handrajo, or the filling part of today's recipe, you will need 2 large eggplants, 1 large onion, 28 ounces of peeled whole canned tomatoes drained, 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 1 teaspoon of salt, fresh ground black pepper to taste, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. This amount of filling will definitely make more than 18 borrecas de handrajo, so you may want to triple that dough recipe and make 54 because you will have plenty of filling. What I like to do is to use that filling as a side dish because it's just a delicious stewed eggplant that I absolutely love to serve as a vegetable. And for today's recipe, to teach you how to make them, I will be making 18. But if you want to use all of the filling, then I suggest you triple the dough recipe. You will also need a cutting board, a large knife, and a long thin knife, a large fork such as a serving fork, and a large spoon such as a serving spoon, along with another regular spoon. You'll need some dry measuring cups, some wet measuring cups, and you will need a large bowl with either a lid or some plastic wrap to put on top of it. You will also need another medium-sized bowl and a smaller bowl with a strainer, and you will need a bowl, a fork, and a pastry brush, some measuring spoons, a small bowl with a teaspoon, a cooling rack, and some oven mitts, and finally, a medium-sized pot with a lid and a baking sheet with some parchment paper. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is get our vegetables ready for our handrajo filling. So what you want to do is peel and dice your onion, and then you can just use the back of your large knife to add that diced onion right into your medium-sized pot. Now, once your onion is in, then we're gonna work on the eggplant. So what you wanna do is peel your eggplant, because for this handrajo filling, I'm gonna cut the top and bottom off my eggplant, and then I'm going to remove all of the peel, because I also want to dice my eggplant, because I really just want to create smaller pieces so that as my eggplant, tomato, and onions stew together, then they will just completely fall apart and really give us that traditional handrajo feel, that old clothes, just torn apart feel. So then, of course, you're just going to repeat the same process with your second eggplant, removing the top and bottom, and then, of course, peeling it completely. And then I just slice my eggplant in half and put it face down on my cutting board, and then I just chop it up. I just cut it lengthwise, and then I cut it in the opposite direction just to create some cubes, because I really just want to dice this eggplant up so that it'll cook and break down beautifully. So just to make the process easier, I dice up one eggplant and then I add it to my medium pot, and then I do the same with my second eggplant. I'm just gonna dice that one up too and then add it to the pot. So don't worry if the pot appears to be really full at this point, because eggplant really breaks down and reduces as it cooks, so there will be plenty of room in this pot. So now that all the eggplant is in, I'm going to work on my tomatoes. So I like to use peeled whole tomatoes because they're just really easy to work with. So what I do is I place my strainer over a bowl and then I just pour my tomatoes right in, because what I want for this recipe is the actual tomato, the pulp. I don't want all that extra sauce. So I pour it right over my colander or my strainer, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove a lot of that sauce. And you can cut it up on a cutting board, but I just like to grab them and just squeeze them right there in my strainer and just break up those beautiful, gorgeous tomatoes that are really, they smell incredible and then just so full of beautiful juices. And I just squeeze them right there, right on top of my strainer, so that the liquid can fall through into the bowl that I have underneath, because what I really want to preserve is the pieces of tomato itself, not the juice. For this recipe, we don't want it to be super wet because the eggplant already lets out a lot of liquid as it cooks. So we don't want to add all that extra liquid to our filling, because of course we don't want to have a soggy borreca de handrajo. So once we've broken up all of our tomatoes and we've strained out all of that excess liquid, then of course we are going to be adding these delicious tomatoes to our pot. Now, I'm going to use just the pulp, but that tomato sauce is absolutely delicious. So I am going to conserve that sauce because I can use that in any other dish while I'm cooking in my kitchen. And it's just delicious. It came straight out of those beautiful tomatoes. So you definitely want to conserve that. You want to put it away and save it for another recipe. So now right into the same pot, we are going to add our extra virgin olive oil and just drizzle it on top all the way around. And then we are going to start seasoning. So you're going to add your salt. And then you'll add your onion powder. And then you can add your garlic powder. And then finally, I'm using fresh ground black pepper. So I just grab my pepper mill and I just grind some fresh ground pepper right on top. Of course, you can use ground pepper too. That's fine. And this, of course, I do to taste. Now, I will mention handrajo is a mild flavor. It doesn't have any really strong seasonings. It's just salt, pepper, onion, a bit of garlic. And then, of course, the delicious flavors it gets from the eggplant and the tomatoes and the onions as they slowly stew together. But if you're someone who really needs stronger flavor, then of course you can add spice, or you can add cumin, or you can add whatever you want to bring out more flavor. But I'm going to keep it simple and straightforward, the way my grandmothers would have made it. Of course, You can even add cheese if you really wanted to. Of course, this is a non-dairy borreca, but if you wanted to go with cheese, you can add parm or feta or anything you want to spice this up. But I'm going to keep it very traditional and just straight delicious stewed vegetables. So now we're going to put on our lid and we're going to turn on our stove. And I have a simmer setting, so I'm going to go to like a medium simmer. But if you don't have a simmer setting, then low is perfectly fine. And we're going to leave that lid on and every so often give it a little stir. And we're going to set a 60-minute timer. And as I said, just come around every so often, see how it's doing, stir the vegetables together, and then put the lid back on and allow it to continue to cook. Of course, it takes 60 minutes on my stove, but every stove runs differently. Yours may run hotter or cooler, so keep an eye on it. But it should take about an hour for these vegetables all to break down and to become absolutely delicious and to get that consistency that we're looking for. So you will quickly see that the eggplant really starts to release liquid, which is why I didn't add any additional liquid to this dish, because we definitely want these vegetables to thicken up as they cook, and they are going to reduce tremendously. So you can already see we have leftover space in this pot. It was definitely large enough, and look at how much it's reduced as it cooks. So all I've been doing is giving it a little stir, coming to check on it every so often, and it is reducing. The flavors are marrying together and they smell delicious. And so it's been an hour and my handrajo filling is ready. I'm going to turn off my stove, and this is pretty much what it should look like after an hour. So you can see it's thickened up a whole lot. It does have a little bit of liquid to it, but really it's very little and it's negligible. And as we add this to a bowl, which we're going to be scooping from as we fill our borrecas de handrajo, the liquid that it does have, which is very little at this point, will settle towards the bottom of the bowl and it will not bother us as we fill our delicious borrecas. So we made our filling first because we need this filling to cool, which is why I'm taking it out of the pot and I'm adding it into a bowl. And I'm actually going to just use my spoon and give it a stir every so often. You see, it just has a very little touch of liquid, but it's really negligible. That amount of liquid is absolutely perfect. And all I do is I come in here and I'm going to scoop from there and fill my borrecas. But they're too hot at this point. These eggplants still need to cool down. And so I'm just giving it a little stir to help it release some of that steam and start the cooling process. Now, while it sits here and cools, we'll work on our dough. So what we want to do is add our flour to a large bowl. And then to that flour, we are going to add our salt. And if you've seen me work on my potato and cheese borreca pie or my spinach and cheese borreca pie, you've seen me make this dough before because this is the same exact type of dough. And you know that I use my trusty fork, just like my grandmother taught me, because this is how she made it. And if it worked for her, it works for me. So right on top of this flour and salt mixture, you're going to add your oil. And what you want to do is you're going to use that trusty fork and you're going to start to combine the ingredients. And you're going to notice that the flour starts to absorb the oil and it completely changes the texture of the flour. It's going to become first a wet, sandy mixture, and then you're going to notice that pebbles start to form. So what you're looking for is you do not want to see any dry flour. You just want to see these beautiful golden pebbles that we are going to be forming by just stirring this mixture gently. And use the side of your fork. If you get any clumps, you can just break them up with the side of your fork and then just continue to stir until you don't see any dry flour. It takes a few minutes to bring all of these ingredients together and to get the consistency that we are looking for. But of course, sometimes you may have added just a little more flour when you measured your flour out. So as you stir, if you notice that you still, after a few minutes of this, because you do need to be patient and break up those larger clumps, if you don't see it looking like this right here, then you can always add a little extra drizzle of oil because this is the color and the consistency that we are looking for. So Once you get to that point, then you're going to measure out your water and you're going to heat it in the microwave. And I heated it up for a full minute in my microwave because I wanted it to be fairly hot. I do want my water nice and warm. And then I add it right on top of the mixture and I use my fork and I continue to combine the ingredients. And once again, you're going to notice it transforms the texture of these ingredients. It immediately starts to form a dough. So you're just going to use your fork and stir a few times and you're noticing that the ingredients start to come together. I actually also use my fork to scrape the sides of my bowl as I go along and pick up anything that may stick. So now that my dough has pretty much come together, I'm just going to clean off my fork and I'm going to switch to my hands and you're going to see how incredible this dough feels. It's just supple and soft. It's just an incredible dough. I love it so much and I use it in so many different recipes in my kitchen. And once you learn how quickly it comes together, really, it just took a matter of minutes to bring this dough together. And you can use it in so many applications. You can fill it with so many different things. And as I said, I have a few recipes up already, including a couple of different tapada recipes, and of course my pastelicos, which are filled with ground beef. And of course, you could totally use this to make traditional Sephardic-Turkish borrecas. Just use that potato and cheese filling from my tapada de papa y queso or borreca pie, and it is a perfect borreca. The dough is super versatile. You're gonna love working with it. So once you bring it together and it's become cohesive, you just form a ball and you're gonna stick it in your bowl. And then if you have a lid, you're gonna put the lid on top. If you don't have a lid, then of course, plastic wrap is totally fine. The idea is to keep this beautiful dough from drying out because we're going to let it rest for 15 minutes. So I'm gonna set a 15-minute timer and that way the eggplant filling also will continue to cool. So after the 15 minutes have passed, our dough is ready and we are going to be forming our beautiful borrecas de Handrajo. So all I do is I separate my dough into 18 balls. This is the size that you are looking for. It's just about the size maybe of a ping pong ball, but you should be able to get 18 out of this recipe. So once you form those balls, then you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, making sure you have a rack placed in the center. And then we're gonna grab our first ball and we're gonna shape our first borreca de Handrajo. So I use my hands to shape my borrecas, but there are a lot of methods. I use the hard part of my palm and I just press my dough down right on my counter or my work surface. And then I keep those balls covered as I work because I don't want my beautiful dough drying out. And then I just start to fill them. But you can use a rolling pin or a handheld roller, or you can even roll out a bigger piece of dough and then just cut out using a cup, cut out a round shape. Whichever way you prefer to work is totally fine. But I love this method of just making these balls and then just flattening them out with my hand. And notice I'm using a teaspoon for the filling because that way I can control how much filling I put in, because we want enough, but we want not too much because we don't want our beautiful borrecas exploding as we cook them. So you see how I just folded the dough over onto itself and then I'm just pressing those edges down. And then I'm going to just braid the edges of my delicious borrecas. So this is actually a really funny process that my friends and I like to call the pinchifol, which is basically pinch and fold. So that's really all you're doing. When they watch this, they're all gonna laugh because a few of us have gotten together a few times and we like to call this the pinchifol. And of course, I've done this a million times with another group of friends of mine that I love so much that we used to get together all of the time to make these with the traditional potato and cheese filling. And so I'm thinking of all of those lovely friends as I teach you how to make these beautiful borrecas. So I'm gonna make a couple just to show you again how that works. And as I did before, I'm just gonna grab one of my balls, roll it a little in my hands, flatten it just a touch, put it down on the counter, and then I use my fingertips, I stretch it out a bit, and then you always can use that hard part of your palm to just kind of press it down and get it into a rough round shape. Round or oval works perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Notice the dough really works with you. You just go around and you use your fingers to get it into the shape that you need. Then you're going to use that teaspoon. You're going to add some of that delicious eggplant filling. And notice that I'm just grabbing from the very top so that any liquid that still remains kind of settles towards the bottom, and I just grab with my spoon and leave whatever liquid behind because I do not want that liquid in the filling of my Borrecas de Handrajo. So I filled it up, and then I grabbed my dough and I gently fold the dough over, and I bring it on over to itself, and then I pinch those edges down. See, I'm using my index fingers and my thumbs to just pinch those edges together to bring both layers of dough together. And then I'm going to show you a different angle. See, I just do it right there on my counter. You're just folding the dough over as you go to create that little braided traditional edge that we love so much on a delicious Sephardic-Turkish borreca, and just fold it over. El pinchifol is what we call this. Or at least that's what I call it with some of my friends. So once we've done our beautiful edge, then we just add it right on top of our tray, which you see I prepared with parchment paper so that my borrecas don't stick as they bake. So now I'm going to teach you another method in case the pinchifol or the braided edge is too difficult and you're finding that it's just giving you a hard time and it's not working for you. So we do have another option. Many times my grandmother used to use this method. Actually, my mom's mom used to use this method all of the time because it was just quicker and it was simple and it just works. It's just as effective and it really looks pretty. So it works perfectly. So I'm going to show you this other method that you can use instead of the braiding of the edge to make your borrecas. So we do the same thing. We fill it with our spoon, and then we're going to fold the dough over right on top of that filling just to kind of meet the other dough on the other side. And then we're going to press it down using our thumbs and our index fingers. And then instead of forming a braid, what we're going to do instead is we're going to grab a fork and we are going to press these edges together with the back of our fork. So you still have that same traditional shape, but you don't have to do the braiding of the edges. So let me show you what I mean. So let me actually position this in a way where you're going to see it real well towards the camera. So I just press those edges down real well and then make that beautiful crescent kind of shape, half moon kind of shape. And then you just grab your fork and you use the back of it just like this and just press that dough down using that fork, and see we get a beautiful finish and a beautiful edge on our borreca without having to do that braiding process. So if you have a hard time with the braiding process, then you can skip it and you can just use a fork and you can shape your borrecas with your fork instead, and they're just as pretty. They stay closed when they bake, and they're just as beautiful and just as delicious. So we're going to add this one onto the tray, and then I'm going to continue to make the rest of my borrecas. You just repeat the process over and over until you've shaped and either braided or pressed with your fork all of the edges. You add them onto your tray, and then they will be ready for topping and for baking. I mean, look how beautiful these look. Honestly, this dough is so amazing to work with, and you could really get creative and fill it with so many different things. And just look at how beautiful they are. There are my beautiful 18 borrecas, and like I said, you're gonna have a lot of filling, so you can make more, but just in order for me to teach you, I decided to go with what I call my single batch, which is 18. But look at how much more Handrajo filling we have. So we could definitely triple that dough recipe and you would have enough to make 54 if you wanted to. So now that my 18 borrecas are ready, what I did was I beat an egg and I added just a touch of water to it. And then I'm going to give all of my borrecas a really good egg wash. You can take that egg wash all the way to the edge. You want to make sure you get that braided edge. You want to make sure you cover the whole borreca. Just get in there, go into the sides, and just make sure you cover it nicely with that egg, because the egg is going to help our borrecas get a beautiful color, but it's also going to help our sesame seeds stick onto our borrecas. So when I make my traditional potato and cheese filled borrecas, I like to top them with some shredded Parmesan cheese. And I do the same if I'm filling them with spinach and cheese, or even with my almodrote de berenjena, my eggplant casserole that I make with cheese is a delicious filling for borrecas. But when I use those fillings, then I top my borrecas with some shredded Parmesan cheese. But when I fill them with handrajo, or when I make my pastelicos, which I fill with ground beef, then I top those with sesame seeds, because I'm doing a non-dairy borreca, and I just like to distinguish them with the sesame seeds. And of course, it adds a beautiful flavor to our already delicious dough, and it just looks fantastic. It just finishes them off and makes them look really great. So as you can see, I used a small bowl and a teaspoon to help me sprinkle on sesame seeds onto all my borrecas. And then I'm using a long, thin knife with a sharp tip. And I actually like to create a couple of vents in my borrecas, because this way it'll let the steam out of my borreca as it bakes, and it helps us avoid any spillage, any popping of a borreca while it bakes, because sometimes as the steam accumulates inside of the borreca as it cooks, then if it doesn't have a way to escape, it's going to want to pop our borreca. And especially with the filling like handrajo, which is slightly moist, then we definitely want to create a vent for that steam. And the good thing is that if we get any spill, then the tomato inside of these borrecas actually caramelizes and tastes absolutely delicious. So it just adds a little character to your borreca. So it's fine if they spill or they pop a little, that's okay too. But in order to avoid a lot of popping, I like to poke them with a knife. So now they are ready to go into the oven, and I'm going to set a 30-minute timer to allow them to bake. And the kitchen is smelling incredible. They're so deliciously savory, and here they are 30 minutes later. They are beautiful. None of them opened. They have that beautiful sesame on top. They are golden. That egg wash definitely gave them color and character, and a little bit of that tomato that pops out gives them a little bit of a golden color and just a little extra caramelized flavor. They're absolutely delicious. You are going to love these. I cannot wait to get into them. They smell divine. And look at just how beautiful, no matter which edge you went with, whether you did the braided edge or you just folded them and pinched them down with the back of the fork, they look fantastic. So what I do at this point is I remove them from my hot pan as soon as I'm able to touch them. Just be very careful because they are hot. And then I'm going to place them on a cooling rack to allow them to fully cool. And just look at how beautiful they look. Really, you see what I mean about that little bit of tomato, a little bit of that sauce that kind of pops out through those vents as they bake. It just gives them character and flavor, and they look beautiful, but they've completely kept their shape. The braiding looks great. They are absolutely gorgeous, and they are so delicious, and they're different because this is a borreca that is filled with eggplant. It's not your typical potato and cheese or spinach and cheese. It's something that is very, very different and very, very delicious. So once your borrecas have cooled down, of course, if you've been able to not eat some while they're still hot, just be super careful because they're really delicious right out of the oven. Then you're just going to transfer them onto a serving plate, and they are ready to be enjoyed. I mean, really, look at how gorgeous these look. That beautiful sesame on top, that flaky dough that really is so easy to put together. So, so delicious. And of course, that delicious handrajo filling on the inside. I cannot wait to try them. Look at how beautiful they look with that sesame coating on top. And really, they're just golden and beautiful. They just really turn out really spectacular. And this is something that everyone is going to love. So, Enough with the admiring. It's time to taste one. I've decided to cut it so that I can show you what they look like on the inside before I take a bite. You see that beautiful eggplant and tomato and onion stewed inside. Delicious. It's just, I cannot wait to take a bite of these. The bottom is golden. They all look amazing. The edge is crispy. This is just a delicious bite. Wow. So tasty. Definitely different than a potato and cheese or spinach and cheese borreca. It's a delicious borreca filled with stewed eggplant, tomato, onion, with that flaky, flaky, delicious dough. So good. And that crispy edge is my favorite part. It's just absolutely divine. You're going to love these. Amazing, so good, so yummy. You've got to try these. So how incredible do these Borrecas de Handrajo look? They are so good. Talk about savory. That amazing filling is really totally unexpected and just so delicious. That eggplant slowly stewed with the tomato and onions just gives an incredible flavor and texture. And it's just a surprising filling for that delicious flaky borreca dough. This dough is super versatile and you can use it in so many applications, as I do and as I have in other videos, such as my tapada de papa y queso or tapada de espinaca y queso, my spinach and cheese or potato and cheese borreca pies. This is that same dough, but we're making them individual. And of course, in this case, we're filling them with handrajo, that tomato, eggplant, stewed onion, delicious filling. They are super good. Trust me. No, better yet, don't trust me. You're gonna have to try to make this recipe yourself. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's recipe, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Share away, share the love with your friends. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please remember to subscribe to my channel and to touch that little notification bell so that you get notified every time I put up another amazing recipes. And be sure to check out my video tab because there are already a ton of delicious recipes there. And if you're not already following me on social media, you can follow me as Sally That Girl in the Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, and as Sally That Girl FL on Twitter, Snapchat, and TikTok. See you next time. Sally That Girl in the Kitchen.